Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. In today's episode, Anthony Power and I are going to be taking a deep dive look into BitFuFu. This is a reasonably sized miner. They've got over 34 exahash under management, a market cap north of $500 million, and one that we haven't really talked about on the channel. Before we get into it, take a second, hit the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comments section below if you've heard of BitFuFu before and if you're currently holding shares. With that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay guys, so Thursday morning, here we go. Unfortunately, we had to push the Sam Tabar Bit Digital interview until tomorrow, so glad we could still fit that one in the week. But today, Anthony, we wanted to switch things up a little bit, take a look at one of the new miners we haven't discussed on the channel, BitFuFu. We actually ran into the team down in Las Vegas. I had a great discussion with the investor relations component of the company and thought it's high time we start maybe a spotlight feature on the channel. So that's going to be the main event here. Before we get into it though, Bitcoin itself hovering north of $107,000. Miners for the most part red today.
Yeah, a little bit of a pullback for Bitcoin on a daily trajectory, but still, if you look at the 5-day chart, you'll see that it's still well above where we were at the start of the week. So in this band, and yeah, I mean, if it stays above 100,000 for a few more weeks, that's great, and hopefully we'll get to see another all-time high in the near future.
We certainly will. Yeah, we had that base building in the $60,000 range, then the $90,000 range. Now it appears in the $105,000 range, starting to build a little bit of a base. Now, if we move over to the miners update here, Anthony, you can see a couple of highlighted names on the list. Core Scientific, top of the charts today, the only miner in green at the time this was taken. So obviously a little bit of insulation from the Bitcoin price based on that CoreWeave contract. Soluna, interestingly enough, on the other end of things here, wanted to highlight this one just based on the volatility. We mentioned yesterday's podcast, Soluna has been up, down 10, 12, 15% every day here, it seems, over the last few weeks. Staying true to that course today as well. And then, of course, BitFuFu highlighted in the middle there, going to be the focus of today's podcast. As you can see, market cap on this one actually north of $500 million, Anthony.
Yeah, north of $500 million. That puts them slightly ahead of Bitfarms, and that's no mean position to be in there. Bitfarms have over 19 exahash, have a number of sites that are going to be utilized for HPC, hopefully in the future. Yeah, you mentioned Core Scientific there, and they're the only miner just about in the green today, hovering around basically the same price it closed yesterday. But if you look at the trading volumes, a lot of these miners, they're down today, significantly what they were when we've normally done this podcast, and you can see that from Core Scientific, 1.7 million shares traded, normally trade 14 to 15 million a day there. Look at some of the big hitters, Riot Platforms. They're normally trading 20, 30 million shares by this time of the day. They're only down at 11 million. TeraWulf at 14 million. Their normal traded daily range is nearly 40 million. So, not as many shares trading in the mindset today. Maybe people having a look elsewhere or paying attention to something else. The US golf is on at the moment. So maybe people watching the golf instead of watching the mining stocks. Who knows? In terms of BitFuFu, they're actually trading 401,000 shares as we speak, compared to an average normally of about 370,000. Now, that's not particularly high in terms of when you think the share price is about $3.15. So that's effectively just over $1 million of shares traded a day. And for a company that has a 500 million market capitalization, that's not a great amount of shares. It'd be interesting to see the breakdown of the shares that are held in the company. Maybe there's a lot of shares held internally, and that's why there's not a lot traded every day, but we'll probably cover that another time. We need to do a little bit more research on them there. You're right, say Soluna at the bottom there, but we'll cover Soluna's update. We'll reiterate what they came out with yesterday with a little bit more information provided. They're trading at 9% down today, but that stock's been up 10%, down 9%, up 15%, on different days this week. So, the market, I thought the market would have reacted a lot more positive to the update yesterday, and we'll cover that towards the end of the podcast.
And I do recall, Anthony, when we met with IR down in Las Vegas, they did mention a large amount of the shares are locked up, so to speak. We'll see in the slide deck here some of the strategic investments in BitFuFu, but a lot of those shares are spoken for, so to speak. Now, if we jump into the investor deck, we wanted to do a quick little background on the history of BitFuFu. This one came out in December of 2020, so you often talk about the fact the mining space is still such a young industry on the channel. This one only been around 5 years or so, but you can see a number of strategic partnerships early in the company history with Antpool, Bitmain, and then back in 2022, Anthony, over $70 million raised through a strategic pipe with Bitmain and Antpool. So that could account for a large portion of the shares as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, Chinese mine Bitmain are biggest supplier of mining equipment, and Bitmain actually invested in BitFuFu. So we've noticed Bitmain are invested in quite a few of the miners at the moment. Some of that has to do with the fact that they'll provide machines and take some equity in the company. So that may well have been one of the reasons for Bitmain's investment there. Managed to list on the Nasdaq literally just over a year ago. And, in terms of what they delivered over that sort of the first 4 years, they were delivering consecutive revenue growth and positive net income over that position there. So, and we can't say that for all the miners, because we talked yesterday about, how many miners have been positive, in quarters over the last, say, 2 or 3 years. And, not many miners would have maybe more than 3 or 4 of those quarters in green territory. Here's a mine that's had positive growth. And we'll talk a little bit more about the business shortly.
Yeah, we're going to look at both the Q1 numbers that just came out on the 5th of May and the May production results versus April. We'll get into that in a second. Before we do, though, and this is interesting what caught our attention with BitFuFu, if you look at their lines of business, again, diversified, very similar to what we see with Bitdeer. They've got cloud mining, which we're going to explore in a little bit more detail, hosting, and then self-mining, but a little bit of a twist on the self-mining as well. So the cloud mining, Anthony, is where I really wanted to spend a little bit of time here. For those of you who aren't super familiar, it's essentially like hosting, but taken a step further, where the company will actually provide or lease the machines as well. So you or I, as a client, Anthony, they've got over 600,000 of these clients now, would approach BitFuFu, say, hey, I'd like to start mining. I don't have anything. I don't have the machine, the equipment, the facility, energy. I just want you guys to do it for me, and I'm going to buy a sliver of that hash rate, or a piece of the pie, so to speak. So this one is interesting, and you can see as of 2024, makes up around 59% of the total revenue within BitFuFu.
Yeah. So, purchasing the hash rates as opposed to, physically going out there and buying mining machines. Very similar to what Bitdeer did also. They had a cloud hash rate. Well, they still have a cloud hash rate mining services. And we spoke to them about, how, is it profitable? And they were saying that, during the cycle, there are times when it's really profitable, really good to have these backup systems to support self-mining, because Bitcoin of the last 4 years hasn't always been over 100,000. I mean, go back to the end of December 2022, it was around about $15,000. So by having some of these other services that are good revenue drivers, and you're getting a margin irrelevant of the actual price of Bitcoin, there's times when these other services can be really, really useful to have as backup.
There certainly are, and they talk about that a little bit more detail throughout the earnings presentation. Now, similar to what we've seen in the investor decks from the miners we cover on a regular basis, a nice little map here talking about that golden word we've seen, the power pipeline, Anthony. So over a gigawatt of pipeline secured by 2026. Interestingly enough, a large footprint in the United States, which we've covered on the channel, really spread across the United States, but also some international exposure, even mining in Ethiopia down in Africa.
Yeah, and we know that there was a few miners going to Ethiopia. We know that the Chinese miners went there before the US miners actually, but we know the likes of Mara also went to Ethiopia when that started a couple of years ago to source what was available there. And this is from the numbers here. This looks like the biggest site that BitFuFu currently have. They're 187 megawatts in Ethiopia. You can see that the power price there, using that hydropower electricity, 3.6 cents. So, anything under 4 cents a kilowatt hour for a mining company is really good. And if you consider what their efficiency rate is for their mining fleets, and they've got a decent sized mining fleet, we've already said, if you just look at it from a total hash rate, they've got 34.1 exahash, of which about 4.2 of that is self-mining. But that total fleet efficiency is under 20. It's 19.1. And so that puts them in that sort of top echelon in terms of efficiency. And when you've got a low cost of power and 3.6 cents, and bear in mind they've got another 51 megawatts in the US at 3 cents for grid power, their blended rate is probably well under 4 cents. So they're achieving great efficiency, low cost power, which means margins should be good, certainly at the current price of Bitcoin today.
Yeah, most definitely. I wanted to get your thoughts on that 3 cent or approximate 3 cent power in the United States. That's very low compared to the average we see. Obviously, CIFR potentially a little bit lower. IREN, Riot, based on the market rate, could be in that range. But 3 cents, Anthony, caught my attention specifically in the US.
Yeah, and bear in mind they've put their 51 megawatts of in the US at circa or approximately 3 cents, but in total in the US they've got 255 megawatts in use. So maybe if I was to sort of consider where that probably is, I would say that's probably in Texas, because we know that a lot of the miners in Texas, especially using the market rate for power, have been able to achieve around about 3 cents. So, and if you look at the chart of the US there's definitely a nice little flag there in Texas itself. So that could well be where they're achieving that there. I don't think any other states are getting as close to 3 cents power like Texas have been providing, in terms of the likes of the updates we've received from IREN, from Riot Platforms, from CIFR. A lot of big miners operating in there. Galaxy Digital operates in Texas as well. They've got low power costs there. So I would say the 51 is there.
Yeah, most definitely. And that's exactly why you pay attention to the footnotes. So you can see next up, they've got a nice little breakdown of what this cloud mining means at BitFuFu, how it works, again, some of the benefits, and what the company, being BitFuFu versus the customer or client, would bring to the table. Now, interestingly enough, if we look at the self-mining, I mentioned there's a bit of a twist on this. Again, it's multifaceted here, Anthony. Yes, some of their machines are self-owned, more traditional self-mining, as you alluded to, 4.2 exahash out of the 34.1, but they also take advantage of cloud mining on an enterprise level as well. So BitFuFu will actually go out and purchase hash rate, essentially the exact same model they offer to clients or customers on a more retail basis.
Yeah, and the benefit of providing this type of service is when the machines aren't being used for cloud service, they automatically are adopted for self-mining, and that's exactly the same model that Bitdeer also used. And remember, Bitdeer were formerly, a Chinese miner as well. So this seems to be a thing from Asia. They've got a strong presence over there, and when we talk to Bitdeer about their customers, it was predominantly Asian customers as well who want to be involved in this type of service. And so, quite clearly, BitFuFu, are buying some of the most efficient machines. When you're talking about 19 joules a terahash, you're talking about, effectively an element of S21 miners or T21 miners in that there, because the S19s can't get to that sort of level of efficiency. So, it's a really good mechanism. It's worked well for Bitdeer. They've got strong numbers, over their last few quarters in terms of this type of service, as their accounts have shown over the last 4 years.
Yeah, appreciate the breakdown there, Anthony, and always interesting to learn about new business models in the Bitcoin mining space. Now, speaking of the numbers, we wanted to jump into Q1 results. This came out on the 5th of June, so quite recently here as well. Interesting to see the breakdown between the cloud and self-mining. Some good numbers in here if you want to walk us through the highlights.
Yeah, so in terms of 2025 first quarter revenue, 78 million, which is down from the same quarter in 2024, by 46%. But bear in mind, since that period, we've actually had a halving event and we've had a significant rise in difficulty. And as with every other miner out there, they've all been tarred with the same two elements to show how that revenue's decreased over the period there. So effectively, they have three business streams. One is the cloud hash rate, which you talked about. That represented 68% of the revenue. Secondly, they have the self-mining, 4.2 exahash. That accounted for 22.5%. And thirdly, they also receive funds from the selling of mining equipment as well. That represented 7.7%. Now, they did make a net loss, as did the majority of miners in Q1, even though the average revenues was sort of like 85 million per Bitcoin. They made a net loss of 16.9 million. That was compared to a net profit of 35.3 in the same quarter of the previous year. But we've already alluded to the fact that, two elements really brought that number down, the halving and difficulty. Adjusted EBITDA, which looks at predominantly all the cash costs that are involved there, that was also negative 10.8 million. Again, the majority of miners in Q1 had a negative EBITDA, adjusted EBITDA. And in the same quarter of the previous year, it was just shy of 50 million positive adjusted EBITDA. Now, one thing that they do have that's worthy of note there, the combined cash and cash equivalent balance on the balance sheet, 144 million as at the end of March, and that's compared to 168 million as at the end of December 31st. But bear in mind, this is a company that has been growing hash rate effectively quicker than some of the biggest miners we're talking about. And so, the hash rate from the end of March through to the end of May has significantly increased. I think it was 20.6 at the end of March, and we're currently at 34.1 exahash at the end of May. So that's an extra nearly 14 exahash in a couple of months there. Now, we talked about IREN. They need to achieve 9 exahash this month to get to their total of 50. That gives you an indication how much hash rate BitFuFu have been growing. In terms of power capacity, 478 megawatts as the end of March, and as at today's date, we're already up to 651 megawatts as at the end of May. And if you look at the number of registered users, you mentioned this earlier, Bryce, over 607,000 cloud mining registered users.
Excellent. Now, you mentioned a few numbers there, Anthony. If we fast forward now to the May update, you can see continuing to grow the cloud mining users, now in excess of 615,000. So definitely seeing some demand there. They actually state in the investor deck, the cloud mining sees a big uplift during bull market conditions here. Obviously, more people want to get involved with Bitcoin mining as the price continues to go up. The other interesting number that caught my attention here, Anthony, in the month of May, a 91% or 91.4% month over month increase in Bitcoin. Now, keep in mind, the self-mining is only a portion of this, but again, to your point, a lot of growth going on at BitFuFu as we now fast forward into the May update here.
Yeah, so if you look at May and compare it to where we were in April for the company, 400 Bitcoin mined in May, only 209 Bitcoin mined in April. So that way you get the 91.4% increase. Now, a very small portion, at 3% of that will be because of the extra days mining in May, but that's a significant amount of increase in Bitcoin mined. Now, some of that is down to the fact that their total hash rate under management has increased from 28.3 at the end of April to 34.1. That accounts for about 20%. So the only thing I can assume is obviously they grew from March through to April, April through to May, and they've not had the benefit of a full month in either of those months at the level of hash rate that they're disclosing for those months there. So even though they disclosed 28.3, that was probably achieved towards the end of the month, and therefore the hash rate started at 20 at the beginning of April, finished at 28.3, an 8 exahash growth in 1 month. How much of that would have been operational throughout the whole month? And that's why when you have that amount of operational hash rate for the whole of May, you then get the real benefit. And that's where we've seen it really grow significantly. Plus the fact they've grown hash rate another 20% during the month of May. So, self-mine hash rate has remained the same. That's remained constant over the last 3 months, 4.2 exahash. We've talked about the efficiency, 19.1 joules. That puts them sort of around the sort of, where CIFR are in terms of fleet efficiency. And only the likes of CleanSpark and IREN can actually beat that at the moment. So really efficient fleet, especially for a miner that has most of its mining machines used for customers in terms of the cloud hash rate business. If you look at Bitcoin mined per day, it went up 85% from 7 in the month of April to 12.9 in the month of May. In terms of mine per exahash, this is where it's sort of, because we don't have an average operational hash rate, these numbers are effectively fairly low compared to peer miners. So 10.24 in May. It was a much improved month compared to April, 8.57. But again, I go back to the fact that they had a massive increase in April, and therefore it says their 28.3 is their hash rate for April. If their operational hash rate was maybe 22 or 23, that's why you would see that number of 8.7 there. They're not really utilizing all those machines. They were plugging them in all the way through the month and probably switched them on towards the end of the month. That's my perception from the numbers I can see in front of me. In terms of HODL dropped 10% during the month. They've been selling Bitcoin at really good prices, 104,000 a Bitcoin to cover, further purchases, to cover corporate operations, and et cetera, et cetera. But if you look at the HODL value for the end of May compared to the end of April, it's literally the same amount. It's only like 1% lower, and they've sold 10% of the HODL. So that way, you can see the Bitcoin price really rallied in May compared to April. It's 104,000 was the average price in May and 94,000 for April there. So that extra 10,000 per Bitcoin has given the HODL effectively the same amount as the previous month, even though they sold, the best part of 242 Bitcoin. And we always like to look at the HODL versus market cap. Remember we said earlier in the podcast, market cap was just over 500 million. The HODL to market cap for the end of May, 34%. And in April, 32%. Market cap was probably close to 550 million as at the end of April. So that HODL value, has increased in value, and therefore, and the share price has dropped a little bit, therefore, give them a little bit more in terms of percentage per market capitalization.
Yeah, it certainly does. And always nice when the Bitcoin price is moving up as you're selling Bitcoin. It minimizes the impact to that value. Now, speaking of HODL, interesting fact here, BitFuFu also on the HODL 15 list of top Bitcoin treasury companies in 21st place. Two interesting facts here, actually, Anthony. The only company on the table with a red arrow indicating sales, they have them listed at 1709 in terms of HODL. And as I mentioned, listed 21st position and the 21st company on this list that we've covered on the channel. So a little bit of interesting trivia facts for you about the channel there, you guys. Now, next up, we wanted to do a plug for Miner Madness. We've got Miner Madness 4.0 launching at the end of the month here, or to kick off Q3. This is obviously the fourth iteration of the competition. Hard to believe this has already been running for nearly a year at the conclusion of Miner Madness 4.0, Anthony, but we're making this one bigger and better than ever. We've got more prizing. We've got some additional entry opportunities or an automated entry feature through our newsletter. And the big finale here, the winner of Miner Madness 4.0, both the analyst board and the regular board are going to be featured on a special guest podcast hosted by Power Mining Analysis and placed on the website alongside of some of the other greats in the industry.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. It'd be great to get the insights of both the analyst and the eventual winner. And the chances are that it won't be the same person, because we've seen in the first three competitions, the analyst has finished, the leading analyst has finished, fairly high at the table, and rightly so if they've got a bit more experience in this area. We've had some really great picks from some of the ordinary investors out there, the retail investors out there, and as you can see from this month, I don't think anyone's going to move the top three away from where they're at the moment with about just over 2 weeks to go for the end of the competition. So it'd be great to get them on the channel, get their insights into how they picked it, where they see the market going, what they're likely to pick for the next quarter. Maybe we get them to answer that question as well. So yeah, really looking forward to doing that for Miner Madness 4.
Yeah, it should be great. I also mentioned an automated entry system. So if you sign up to the newsletter, this is going to be the only verified entry format for Miner Madness 4.0. It'll be available in this week, obviously subsequent weeks as well. You can go in, there's a link attached. We've got some screenshots here. You're able to actually put in your name, your handle, and your picks directly through the newsletter. This goes automatically into the spreadsheet we use so that we don't have to go around and try and assemble all these picks from various different locations or risk missing anyone's picks or entry into the competition. So one of the other great features of the newsletter, obviously you'll get updates, as you can see here, throughout the competition on the leaderboard itself, and again, placed on the wall of recognition or the special guest feature wall on the Power Mining Analysis website. So with that being said, you guys, a few weeks left in this competition. Agrippa still top of the analyst board in 10th place overall. We'll see what transpires over the last few weeks of trading in Q2, but a very exciting event and looking forward to Miner Madness 4.0. And the final piece here, Anthony, we wanted to do a follow-up on the Soluna news that broke yesterday. We've got some additional detail in relation to that Spring Lane Capital financing and wanted to go through some of the specifics.
Yeah, we mentioned yesterday on the podcast about this 20 million capital support from Spring Lane Capital to launch Project Catty 1, and with the potential now of an additional 100 million for pipeline as well. Now, Project Catty is a 35 megawatt site there behind the meter, and this will be the financing itself will help to facilitate the construction of this site. And if you remember about Project Catty, it's a total of 83 megawatts. This amount of funding here is going to cover the first 35 megawatts of that phase. And if you look at the construction timelines, the parties intend to complete documentation and commence construction in Q3 with a goal of achieving initial energization in the first quarter of next year. The new facility will be designed to accommodate about 12,000 of the latest generation Bitcoin mining rigs. So the approvals for Project Catty, it's had all the necessary ERCOT planning approvals, and an ERCOT model update will be submitted at least 90 days before the energization, which we already identified as the first quarter of next year.
Yeah, exciting to see that one progressing, Anthony, getting some more meat on the bone, so to speak, in terms of the details. We'll continue to keep you guys updated. But again, interesting to see the response in terms of share price based on the news out from Soluna. With that being said, you guys, sign up to the newsletter, hit the like button, feel free to subscribe. We'll see you back here tomorrow.